What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Tatro Talks here on 343 TV and on my channel. And I gotta say, if you're watching on my channel, hint, hint, go over to 343 Labs channel because we are going to be doing a giveaway, but you have to be in chat over there to figure out all the info and to enter. Today's guest is a Grammy Award-winning mix engineer, Ariel Borujow. Some credits that I'm just going to read off your website real quick, Ariel. T.I., Imagine Dragons, Chromeo, Chainsmokers, Baby Rexha, Mac Miller, Madonna. Whew, that is quite a list, and I'm super stoked. Thanks for being on today, Ariel.
Man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
It feels good during this time to connect with a fellow human, you know?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
as,
Even
as
if it is virtual.
even if it is virtual, it is connection. And I'm thinking that a lot of our community probably feels the same. So folks, if you are in the chat and along the way, if you have questions for Ariel, questions about things we're talking about, just throw them up in the chat. I'm monitoring all the chats right now, both on my phone and on my computer. We are doing a giveaway today. 3 bundles from Sound Toys. Ariel, I know you love Sound Toys, hence the t-shirt.
Yeah, man. Uh, 3 bundles of the Sound Toys 5. If you guys don't know what that is literally the full bundles. So big shout out to my Sound Toys family for sponsoring and making this happen.
Thank you all for being here in the chat. I'm seeing Darren's telling me it's working. CJ's telling me now it's fine. Everything's okay now. Whew, epic. We're good. Ariel, I think what we were talking about when we cut out was about some of those missteps in either first starting out when you're, learning how to deal with client feedback on a mix or something like that. I mean, I know I deal with that in collaboration all the time, how to take feedback productively. And you were saying like you still have moments like this when
Of
it doesn't
course.
feel great and it feels kind of off. You don't know how to react. Talk about that because you're a seasoned veteran at this point. It's interesting to hear that you cope with this yourself.
Listen, we all have egos in the music business, you know. But the thing that's most important, so it's a good segue into this because when I was starting out, right, you would have to rent out this fancy studio and you had a tape machine and you had this beautiful, at the time they were, $500,000 to more consoles, right? So then what you would have to do is you record, you do a rough mix really quick, and that was your chance as an engineer to become like to do a good job on the rough, that they would be like, wow, this sounds great. Do you also mix, But what's happening now is the tables have turned. We all have the same tools. I'm completely in the box. Like I use Pro Tools, like I mix fully digital. I've been fully digital now for about 12 years.
Wow.
Um, and I I think that what's happening now is because we all have the same tools, artists spend more time on their music, more times sound designing, we like to call it, or I guess mixing, excuse me. And by the time I get it's at a place, the song is at a place that they're happy. So they're looking for like the extra umph that I'm able to provide them. So what's happening is that you have to respect what you're given, whether there's a distorted sound that was intentional or whether the vocal is a little brighter than what you would want. There's intention there. But the most important thing to do as a mix engineer is the correspondence with the client and how important it is to have dialogue with them and speak to them about their vision and where their direction is and everything of that sort.
So are you going back and forth at a certain point? Are you getting involved earlier in projects now to try to kind of get ahead of some of those choices that you might want to make that you kind of don't want the artist to make? Like, what's that flow like?
It depends on the client. Um, Generally, what I see is they'll come to me and we'll get the first song mixed, right? And if it's like a project, let's say, like I'm working with a band now, might be listening, but the first song came out great, and we started feeling comfortable with each other, and what happened was the second song, I just finished it, and what happened with the second song was that there was live drums and there was electronic drums blended, but they weren't playing sometimes at the same time. So I kind of gave them a suggestion, because really mixing is not just about the technical, it's about what can I tell them. Sometimes, like, I'm looking at a song and there might be too much going on, and if I cut certain things out, like just mute them or bring them down in volume or whatever, it helps the arrangement a little bit. So what I suggested, I said, hey, why don't we take the loop that was in the first verse, make that just happen in the second verse, because it'll be consistent with the first verse, but by the time the verse hits and the live drums kick in the chorus, it'll explode, and you can have that conversation. And they actually, we it was such a team effort, man, that it shows them how much you care about their art, because it really is an art, right? Like, you are basically, they're handing you their baby and they're saying, we trust you with this. Like, I have almost a 5-year-old, and like, I just wouldn't hand them to anyone. And it's really like, it's like their child, you know. They've been sitting on it, whether it be a month to like a year on a song, and your
Wow.
job is to take it. So like, the fact that you took enough time to say, you know what, let's stop. How about we do this instead of doing more mix changes? Let's do it this way. And what happens is, they're happy with the fact that you're involved, and you're happy because all of a sudden you built this relationship with them, and it becomes, it's a bigger, it's just bigger than anything. And I think that's the most important thing, and you have to respect their art. You know what I mean? You don't want to step on their toes. And there's sometimes that I do want to change the kick drum or something, but I always speak to the client about it first. Like, I never ever do things without them knowing.
That's an interesting perspective, and maybe for some of us who aren't in the world so much, and I see people jumping in chat, like Tana saying time and putting time and care, and it definitely sounds like you put a lot of time and care, as well as the artist puts a lot of time and care. So as long as those aren't at odds and you guys are kind of working together, it makes for a very positive environment. Is there a culture though in the industry of kind of the experts, the expert engineers, you know, who you kind of send stuff and it's like kind of their way or the highway? Is that a culture currently of in the music industry, or would you say most people are kind of like you, where it's collaborative?
There definitely is. Some of the, like, the very top A-listers, like, when you go to them and you're paying the exuberant amount of money, it's their way or the highway, and some of them let you know that from the jump. I'm not that guy. I'm not that engineer. Like, I believe in collaboration. I love collaborating. When I started with Puffy, I didn't work with artists per se. I was working with producers. So I was an assistant engineer, but then they would say, hey, such and such wants to track this beat in Studio B. Can you go do that? Rather than hire an engineer, I would go in there. And at the time, tracking beats, there was no computers. So you had an MPC, you had a rack of like synthesizers, 4 or 5 keyboards, and every keyboard was going into an input of the tape machine, or at the time Pro Tools, and you would
Whoa.
track it. You would get engineering credit off of that. But I learned how to collaborate with producers. And I feel like for me, when I was coming up in the business, I understood how to work with producers and how to speak with them. I feel like half the time I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a
So
sonic psychiatrist.
it's an emotional approach. I mean, that makes sense because the artist is going in there being very vulnerable with their work and trusting you with their
1,000.
work. So it almost has to
Their
be
art.
like that.
I use the word art. It's their art. You know what I mean? And like, it's the same way that I wouldn't just give my mix to somebody else and say, hey, let me know it, like, do what you do. It's like, you know, but the other side of it is like, as an engineer, you also have your good days and your bad days. If, you know, if my kid gave me a hard time in the morning and I'm in a bad mood and I start a mix, my mix may become more aggressive. And then a day later, I'm like, you know what? I was a little angry, and your emotion shows, because your job as an engineer is to bring out the emotion of the song, whether it's with a certain reverb or a certain delay or a certain low end. If someone says, make the kick drum fluffier instead of like punchy, you know what I mean? Like, you're
Yeah,
bringing emotion into it. Your job is to bring the emotion.
that's great. And we were kind of talking before we went on about your approach to mixing and engineering in general. And, people hear engineering and they hear mixing and they start to think very technically and they start to think very science-y almost. And there is a lot of that to it. There is a lot of technique and technical aspect to it, obviously, because it's engineering. But you kind of described your approach as a little more of, just try things, like not super technical. I'm sure you have the technical base of knowledge, but you aren't afraid to sort of, you're not sticking to any set rules. You're not opening a textbook to say, this is how I'm going to mix this vocal, this is how I'm going to mix this kick.
No, even my template, like a lot of engineers have templates. I have a template where I just have my reverb returns blank. I just bring them in because the way that I mix is I have effects like reverbs and delays just for instruments and then another set for vocals. But I always start like completely from scratch because I don't like rules and I like to do things by feel, and the song will dictate to me what it wants me to do. It'll speak to me in a certain way, and that's the direction that I go. Some songs become more more complicated than others, and some come together very easy. You know what I mean? So it just depends on the day, your mood. But I never start with anything. Like, I'm not a template guy where it's like, okay, I have to use this delay, I have to use this reverb, I have to use. There's never that.
Of course. And I imagine that, well, could you maybe talk about an example of this where something came really easy and it just flowed, and then against something that is kind of super hard? Because I think what people get caught up in, especially a lot of the home studio music producers out there, the learners, like that if it doesn't come easy, that means you're doing something wrong or something's not right. And I think that that's not true. It's just work. Is that kind of
work,
what you think
and
of it as?
sometimes it's as simple as taking 2 minutes or 20 minutes and go for a walk.
Right.
People like, there's always this misconception that it's like, yo, I'm grinding in the studio and I'm in there for 10 hours and I don't leave the studio. And I'm like, man, I don't do any of that. Like, I'll mix for a half hour. I'll go walk my dog, spend a few minutes with my son, work. Like, there's sometimes it's just a certain flow, and not to take it so serious, because really it is about feeling and emotion. And the minute you start overthinking the technicalities, because I tell people most of the stuff that I'm doing when I mix is not really like super advanced. It's the basics. It's an EQ. It's a compressor. It's all of that. I don't do like, sometimes people do parallel processing on everything. And I mean, it's like ridiculous because they watch a bunch of videos, or like they go to like a mix with the masters in France and they come back and they want to mix exactly like the person that was there. You know what I mean? And it's sometimes like everyone has their own style. And I always tell, especially younger engineers and producers, like, stick to the basics. You know what I mean? If you fully understand an EQ, and if you have, and don't concern yourself with like, people are like, man, you have a lot of plugins. When you look at my plugin list, I maybe use a handful of stuff. Like, I'm not overdoing it. Like, I'm using like Plugin Alliance, like SSL emulations. You know what I mean? Like, that's most of my plugins. Then I'm using like SSL bus compressor from UAD. I love that sound of that because I have, you can't see it, but I'm right here. I have a hardware compressor that's literally off and it's a little dusty,
Yeah.
So there, I would concern myself with really learning, just like, find one channel strip that you really like, find one reverb and like learn it. You know what I mean? Because if you ask me, like, I can pick 5 plugins right now that I would want if I was on that's the only thing I had to do, but I could also mix a record using stock plugins.
Totally. And I guess this points us to the elephant in the room, or the elephant in the box, you should say. But you are in the box for the most part.
Not for the most part. The only analog that's here are my speakers. That's it.
That's amazing. Can you, like, is that a conscious decision? Did you just come up that way? What led you to being strictly in the box?
So I started mixing in on my first. My favorite consoles were SSL consoles, the G console, and I loved the mixing on hardware. The last record I mixed on hardware, like with a console, was 2004, 2006. I can't remember. 2004 maybe. Um, and I after that I started going hybrid. So I bought a summing box. I bought the SSL compressor. I have a dangerous backseat cue, dangerous summing box. I have it literally right below me here, and I don't use it like I tried and I loved it. Like I had a really dope mix room in Manhattan for a long time, and clients used to show up there, and I lived a few blocks from the studio, so it was very convenient. But what started happening is one day the story goes that I was mixing this project for a song for EMI Records, and they needed a turnaround in 48 hours. And my summing box, one of the op amps, everyone could go Google what an op amp is, but the left side was out, and I couldn't get a replacement part for 2 weeks, but I had 48 hours to mix. So I took my laptop and I mixed it that day on a laptop. And I got home that night. And while my wife was sleeping next to me, I had my laptop and headphones and I kept mixing the song. And ever since
Wow.
that day, I just stopped. I just loved the way it came out. And my longtime mastering engineer, Ricardo Gutierrez, has always said to me that like my in the box mixes sound punchier, cleaner, dirtier, everything you want, better than summing.
Are you finding that you're having to prove yourself to folks who are ride or die analog,
Nope.
or
No, you know what I
like,
tell people? Close your eyes and listen. Because
and they can't tell the difference?
no, because one of the main reasons I went in the box is there's two mixers. There's Serban Jania and Chad Blake, who are my two favorite mixers. One is pop, hip hop, all of that. Anything Dr. Luke and Benny Blanco and all of that is Serban. And rock is Chad Blake, but Chad Blake is a very experimental mixer. If you want something out of the box, even though he's in the box, you would use Chad Blake because he's interesting. He does really cool things with parallel distortion and stuff. And I've studied these two guys, and I'm like, you know what? This is who I look up to. You know what I mean? Serban's been in the box since 1998 or somewhere along those lines, from what I recently found out. So, like, nobody's as good as him as far as mixes. Like, the way he uses compression is unbelievable. Like, no, and he does. You can't find many interviews on him, if any interviews at all. He's a very quiet guy. But it's him and one guy that he works with, and that's it. And they mix in the box, and they mix all the top records, and that's what I want it to be that. And the other side of it is if I start mixes and my manager books me for some mixes, I can get 70-80% done, and then I could go away with my family for a weekend, bring my laptop, my two UAD satellites, headphones, interface, and that's it. And then I finish on headphones.
Is that we talked a little bit about this before the actual interview too, but is that a huge thing for you? Is the being able to work from anywhere, being able to be with your family, the convenience of it? Like, can you talk a little bit about that lifestyle, and has it always been that way? Did you transition into making it that way?
So coming up in the business, I was friends with a lot of engineers. Some engineers had kids, some didn't. I knew that I wanted a family at some point. It was really important to me, and I knew early on. I used to work at a studio owned by a very famous jazz group called Spyro Gyra, and my first taste of home studio came that they were in the suburbs of New York, upstate, and they had a studio in the woods. It was one of the most beautiful studios I've ever been in, like 5,000, 6,000 square foot live room in a barn, big 72 input Focusrite console, one of 10 in the world. It was gorgeous. Every microphone you can imagine.
It's a
But
dream.
the chief engineer lived in the house next door that you had to go through a little pathway in the woods to get to his house. He had two kids. He had a house with a barn, a little tiny barn next door with a catwalk from his bedroom. right into the studio, and he mixed records there. When I saw that, that was 1996. That was like, or seven, early 96, 97, but right before Puffy's studio. And I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, I need to have a home studio. And once I had my son, Noah, like, that was it. Like, I knew that I didn't want, I was around a lot of engineers who were also divorced from being in the studio too much. And I get it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be that dad. So once I was able to, I bought a house and I was able to put a home studio in and do what most people are doing. And it's been great so far, you know, like I wouldn't change it. Like, do I miss being around a lot of people? Not really, because when I mix, I'm the creative one. I used to be in rooms where there would be 5, 6 people hovering around and hanging out and doing all sorts of crazy things, drinking and going live on, you know, I mean, whatever, anything to distract. And what people don't understand is when you mix, you want to be quiet. I have, sometimes I have all the peace and quiet. He is almost 5, so it's not that peaceful. You
Yeah.
know, he's probably watching right now. Sorry, buddy. But you know, that comes with the territory. But it was definitely pushed faster once my son was born. There's no question.
And it's so interesting because I had Abe Duque on a few weeks back, and he talked about leaving touring life because he didn't want his kids asking, "Where's daddy?"
Mm.
And you really don't think about that in the recording, the mix engineering side, the studio side. You really think about it as touring being the thing that brings you away from home. So it's so interesting to hear you talk about there's that side to being in the studio as well.
Yeah, no question. There's no question. And I mean, again, it was definitely a conscious decision to do it early on, knowing that at some point I wanted to have a family and not be that, you know, that dad that's always gone. And, you know, I wanted to be involved. Like, I wanted to have a good relationship with my son.
For sure. Absolutely. Folks
That's
in the
more important
chat.
than any
Oh,
of
go ahead.
this.
Yeah. Folks in the chat that are following along, thank you so much. If you guys asked questions before the stream went down, go ahead and type them in again because I'm back to being up to date with the chats. But I see lots of great conversation, lots of folks cheering each other on. What's up, Chroma Beats? Nice to see you. La Novelle, what's up? Nikunj, nice to see you. Mika, hello. If I'm missing your name, I'm sorry. Trying to go quick. Delasco, what is going on? Tana's been chatting. The LDJM, what's going on? And Gabu is here. Hey, what's up, guys? But again, if you have questions for Ariel, hey, my mom's in the chat. Ariel, can you say hi to my mom?
Hey, Mom, how you doing?
But thank you all for tuning in. We're having a great time. If you don't know, we're giving away 3 Sound Toys bundles at the end of this stream. So look out for the link that's going to come through in chat and you'll be able to enter. If you don't see a link on my channel's chat, make sure you go and jump in over on the 343 TV chat. And you can get in on that. We're going to be announcing that at the end. You do have to be in the stream to win. And we're chatting with Ariel Borujow. Ariel, one thing I kind of want to go back to in talking about kind of your ladder to success, because it seems like in talking about this conversation, you're very kind of relationship based with people you work with. You're very conversational with people. It's not your way or the highway. As you were coming up and as you were building something for yourself, I assume it's a long ramp to becoming a Grammy award winning mix engineer for sure, I can imagine. Along that way, do you attribute a lot of that success to that mentality? Is it a lot of, yes, technical knowledge, but also being the guy that people want to work with?
I think it depends. You know what I mean? I definitely think it depends on the client and the person. You know, um, sometimes artists can be very difficult and it's their way or the highway, you know, and sometimes
Yeah.
I tell them right away, like, I'm not the right guy for that. We either work together. If you're going to spend the money to have me work on it, like, let's work on it together. You know what I mean? And some people are very open. Most are very open. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to spend the money. They're coming to me for a certain reason, you know, but it has to be, again, I go back to this collaborative process, you know. but it depends. Some people, I think what really the most important thing is that it's how that initial conversation goes with a client. You know what I mean? Like, that's the most important thing, and that's what's going to set everything off in the right direction.
I want to know, but there's something more to it because I think that your mentality is super special, and it must be that people want to work with you. Do you know what is the reason that most clients reach out and say, I want to work with Ariel? Do you kind of have an idea of that?
I think that it's word of mouth. My whole business has been built on word of mouth. Um, yeah, I've worked on some great projects. Um, if I worked with one artist, this other artist knows I worked with this artist, and it becomes this whole entire thing. Um, but most of the time, it is word of mouth. It is, and it's either word of mouth, or it's the quality of the work, or it's an artist that I a certain artist I worked with. Like, I got really into, like, growing up in New York, like, you couldn't escape club music, and club music
Right.
back then was like, it was what we called freestyle. Like, there was older acts like TKA and George Lamont and all these, like, dance artists back in the day. And I was really into that. And then at one point, when I was making frequent trips to LA, I had a friend that worked at Teamwork, and I linked up with Claude Von Stroke, and I was doing some work with him, and through him I worked with Justin Martin. And once I started working with Justin, big shout out to Justin Martin. I don't know if he's watching, but you know, um, through him I started getting other people that wanted to work with me because of that, and I started doing more electronic music, which was something that I wasn't doing because everyone knew me more for hip hop. You know what I mean? But I was a firm believer that a good engineer, if you know what an instrument sounds like and you have the feel for the sound of music, you can mix anything if you just understand and you're good at mixing.
Absolutely. Totally. We have a couple questions from chat.
Go do it.
I'll jump in here. Josh Miles is asking, what are the most common mistakes you see from newbie home producers trying to mix their own tracks? I think and it would be interesting to get your opinion on this too. I think that's kind of becoming the norm for folks. Like, there's a lot more home studio music producers, a lot of people just buying MacBooks or buying whatever, making their own music. They're not going out and getting a mix engineer. Maybe they have a friend or a crew, of people that do different things, but for a lot of the times, a lot of independent artists are mixing their own tracks. Are there common mistakes you're seeing? That's Josh Miles' question.
Yeah, Josh, great question. Really, the most important thing is, do not clip your master bus. That is the most important thing. Don't limit the junk out of your mix. Like, that's the biggest. No brick wall limiting. Learn how
But
to
it's got to
play
be
with.
loud. It's got to be
Yeah,
loud,
play
as
with.
loud as everything.
Turn up your volume. There's a volume knob for that. Um, Really, look, I'm definitely one to believe that, like, everyone should learn how to mix, right? Like, I think it's everyone should learn how to mix. There's a reason people take music theory in college, why it's a prerequisite, even if you're going for an audio technology program, right? But the reason is not like, it's not like you're going to become the next Mozart, or you're not going to become the next big mix engineer. But what's important is learning how to speak the language. You know what I mean? Understanding what a D major chord is, understanding, like, if someone says to me, I really need that kick drum to knock, like, I feel like there's too much 80 hertz and not enough, you know, 500, and being able to speak like that rather than say, I need it to sound more powerful. You know what I mean? Like, that's not communicating. And if you're going to take your music career seriously, really learn all of that, learn the mixing, even though most likely in the future, if you do pursue music and you become successful, there's a good chance that the record company may lead you to somebody like me or some of my other engineer friends who are exceptionally awesome. and we just bring something different to the table, but it takes a village a lot of the times, and it's most important not to focus on like I'm going to mix my own stuff. It's like get as good as you can, because eventually you're going to need to speak the language to somebody, because it does take a village.
Absolutely. So, you're kind of saying like you gotta learn all these things. Like you
Yes.
kind of have to have the feel for the music. I'm interested in that part because I think the thing that I see the most is a lot of people. They'll check out my videos, they'll see my Ableton stuff or whatever, and they'll just want to start doing that with Ableton, but they don't know how to even play an instrument, or they don't even know how to anything about music theory, and that gets a lot of people frustrated. That's what I'm seeing is people putting the cart way before the horse. They have no sense of creating music, but they want to get into music production. It's this weird
No, you got to
thing that's
listen to
happening.
music. First off is the love of music. Like, you got to listen to everything, man. Like, you can't just listen to one genre of music. Like,
And critically too, and like kind of like
critically.
dissecting it in your head. I think that's the important part.
I mean, I was a mix engineer, so I dissected the mixes. Why is this kick drum sound like this? Like, for instance, like off the top, like Motown records, right? I always blow people's minds. Listen to Motown records. What's the loudest sound in a lot of those records? The hi-hat.
Yeah.
Would I have mixed the hi-hat loud? Probably not, but there's a feel that the Supreme records or whatever, those records have a certain sound because of that hi-hat, for instance. You know what I mean? Or Jameson's bass playing, you know what I mean? Like, you got to understand it. You have to dissect these records, and you have to love music. Like, I wake up in the morning, I listen to jazz music. You know what I mean? Like, today I was listening to 90s hip hop. Sometimes I'll put on, you know, when my son's in the car, I got to be careful what I listen to, but I listen to like
Yeah.
Jack Johnson, which a lot of people don't even know who he is, but I listen to Jack Johnson. You know what I mean? Like, it's corny, but I listen to it. Like, I listen to everything. It's it's mood, and if you don't understand, and that's the thing, as a mix engineer and as a producer, you should want to know everything. Listen to classical music, like understand what made Bach and Mozart and Chopin and all these guys so brilliant. Like, learn that stuff. Listen to it, study it. Like, because that's only going to give you knowledge. Is power. It really is.
Totally. We're going to keep going with questions from the chat because a few
Go
more are
pop
coming
out.
in and they're getting excited. Revan the Ultimate says, I love this guy. So that's pretty
I
dope.
love you too.
Mika asks, for mastering, is it worth learning a whole new DAW, so Pro Tools, just to work with industry folks? So like, is it necessary? Should you, if you want to work specifically in the industry, not maybe with some like independent artists that are doing other things, if you want to be in the industry, top artists, do you need to be using Pro Tools?
If you want to be an engineer, I believe yes. And the reason is because it is the standard. And if you get in with one of these artists or producers and they take you to a major studio, you're going to need to know Pro Tools. Are people using Logic and Ableton now? Yes, they are. But if all of a sudden your client that brought you into studio brings you to another client, and the client says, hey, I want you to come out to my studio, and then they're like, we already started this song, it's in Pro Tools, you know can you we need to record these two vocals, and you're like, I don't really work in Pro Tools, I work in Logic only. You think they're going to take the time to like bounce out all 100 stems just for you to track vocals? No, it's not going to happen that way. So yes, if you want to be in that regard, yes, you should.
Good answer. Um, Here's another question from Nikonj. What should the least, what's the requirements of a mix down? So if people are going to send you stuff, what do they need? Like, what do you need? What's the checklist of things that whatever an artist is going to send you, what does it need to have? What do they need to do?
So first off, even if they worked in Pro Tools, I require them to send me the stems separately. I don't even care, just WAV files, meaning, because what I want them to do is I'm not talking about reverb. Let's take about instruments now, right? Let's just focus on the instrumental. If there's like a pop song with vocals, I like my instruments to be processed the way that they have it. The rule of thumb is when I receive the WAV files, when all the faders, when I import the files into Pro Tools and all the faders are at zero, that should be their mix. That should be what they gave me. So the only thing that I do require is, let's say they have vocals. I don't want the reverb to be printed within the vocal. I want the return of the reverb separate. Very simple answer why. The simple answer is, if I have to EQ the vocal because there's a resonant frequency that's bothering me, or I have to boost something or cut, it's also going to EQ the vocal, and that's going to change everything. However, if I have it separated, I can either turn it down, I could listen to it and be like, I don't like that reverb, I'm going to try this, or I could blend it with my own take on it. And that's why I like to have control.
For sure. And that's a good follow-up. Clinton has another question. Over the years, what has become your favorite / least favorite frequencies you commonly end up boosting or subtracting? I like thinking about this, like your Ishmael in Moby Dick, and like there's a particular frequency out there that's like your white whale that you're constantly searching for.
4K.
What are those frequencies? So what are you doing at 4K?
Depends. Sometimes it's boosting, sometimes it's cutting, depending on what the sound is.
So what would be an instance for boosting and what would be an instance for cutting?
The vocal's too dark, cutting, vocal's too mid-rangey.
Very cool.
Listen, the hardest thing for mixing and what makes guys like Serban so dope is like the mid-range. It's not harsh, but it still cuts through on radio. That's
Yep.
When you learn that, that's when you realize how good you're becoming.
For sure. Federico has a kind of a really cool question, and I think it's bouncing off of your Motown comment, like with the hi-hat super loud. Federico asks, can you name a bad mixed song that became popular, even if it sounds awful? Like maybe we don't have to, you don't have to like say like, oh, it sounds awful or whatever, but is there a song that you've heard, a super popular song that you're like, wow, I would have not mixed it this way at all?
Wow, that is an awesome question. Oh my God.
I can think of like an example. This also goes back to the super critical thinking about while you're listening, because if you're just passively listening, you just hear a song, right? Like you don't hear the nuances of it. But I think about listening to, not that this is awful at all, I just think about listening to the nuances of The Killer's Mr. Brightside. Like it starts with like a hard panned guitar. That guitar riff is hard panned one side.
Okay.
And like we got like hi-hats on the other side, the vocals come in like super muffled, and it's not until like the second half of that first verse that all the highs and all the frequency range comes in. Like I think about that.
It was intentional though, you know?
Yeah, no, I for sure think it was intentional. I don't think it was awful. I just think that that's a good example of like when people are listening, like these are the things they should be listening for. And when you critically listen to a mix, you're going to hear things like that you would as an amateur probably never do. Like, oh, they panned that guitar all the way to the right for the first 30 seconds of the song, like, you know, like things like that.
I'll be honest, it's really hard to answer that because it's like questioning people's art. I was going to say, if I were to say anything, was Kanye West's first album. What was it? College Dropout.
College Dropout, yeah.
College Dropout, to me, Manny Marroquin mixed that, you know? But I heard stories that the song Stronger had 11 mix engineers mixing, and he chose one. So like, whoa. I think that it's a feel thing, even though some of the records, to me, I would have mixed differently if I had my hands on it, which would have made me not eligible to have won the mix-offs on that because I would have had my own interpretation of it.
For sure. Absolutely. And before we go any further, I do see a lot of people jumping in the chat. Thank you all for hanging out and asking questions. We'll take more questions in a bit. Make sure. So I believe Thomas, who runs things in the background for us here on 343 TV, is going to be closing that giveaway any minute now. So if you have not yet, there is a link up in this chat where you can enter to win one of the 3 Sound Toys bundles that we are giving away tonight. We are so thankful to Sound Toys and for Ariel to bringing them through as a sponsor tonight. It's really awesome. So you could be one of the 3 winners tonight. Just make sure you're watching over on the 343 Labs channel on 343 TV. You enter at the link and you do that within the next, I would say, 2-ish minutes, because Thomas is getting ready to close that and send me names of winners. So make sure you enter now. Make sure you subscribe to 343 Labs channel. And some of you are talking about learning some of this stuff. You should definitely head to 343labs.com just to check out some of the courses and the workshops, because if you're kind of taking some time at home, or if you're stuck at home, pandemic situation, and you want to kind of level up your production skills, we have mixing and mastering classes, we have Ableton classes, Logic classes, songwriting, music theory, all that. Make sure you're 343labs.com, check out some of the courses, and while you're there,
we are working,
enter the giveaway.
just so you know. We're working on a masterclass that I will be doing.
Oh, nice. So even if you're not going to take one of our like full courses or something, head to the website, sign up for the mailing list so you know when Ariel's masterclass will happen. That will be a good one for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a few days straight.
Oh, like that's like an intensive.
Yeah, it's going to be intensive advanced masterclass.
Oh, God. All right, guys, look out for that for sure. And subscribe to the 343 Labs channel, too, because we'll be posting about it all over social media. Jump into some more questions?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I want to credit this person. Braulio asks, do you think that it is possible to make a good mix with only headphones?
1,000%. If I'm not one of these guys that's like, you can't. I think that whatever you're used to. Some big records were done on headphones. I mean, Andrew Sheps, for those of you that don't know who he is, he's one of phones.
Hold on. Can you say that one more time, Ariel? You cut out really quick for some reason.
I said Andrew Sheps, who's a very famous engineer, swears that he mixes a lot on headphones, on $100 set of headphones.
I believe that from some of the stuff that I've seen from him and like how he works. What do you think? What's some advice for folks at home though? Because a lot of us don't have access to like $1,000 headphones. Is it about just knowing your set of headphones? Is it about just knowing the sound?
This is my headphones. I have the Audio-Technica M50Xs. I use them in conjunction with my SonarWorks. I love SonarWorks. And the speakers that I'm currently using are my Yamaha NS10s, which you can see in the background. And for the last few months, I've been using the Kali Audio LP8s, which are inexpensive and sound absolutely incredible.
Talk about this a little bit, though. How do you go about learning? It could extend to monitors as well. So how do you go about learning the headphones or the monitors so you actually kind of know what you're doing across them?
Listen. Listen to as much music of some of the best records that you found to be mixed well. Listen. That's the best thing I can tell you. It's like getting to know a room. When I built my room, I spent a month and change just listening to music, everything under the sun. That's the best advice I can give. Your ears never lie.
For sure. And Anna is asking a kind of relevant question here. Asking, should we mix on the same monitors or switch between different monitors and headphones? When I mix a song on HS8s, it sounds good, but sounds worse when played on different monitors. Is that just a result of kind of not knowing the monitors?
Yes, 1,000%. And your room, like know your room.
How important is that? Talk about the room and room treatment.
I tell people all the time, spend money on proper acoustic treatment over a super set of expensive speakers, because a super set of expensive speakers and a poorly treated room is not going to do you any justice.
Totally, for sure.
That is like everything. I'm telling you, like I would rather spend my money on a really good acoustic panels or build them yourselves. There's so many ways of going about that.
Absolutely. All right, guys, giveaway is going to close in about 1 minute. So those links, that's your last chance. It will be closed. I'll be getting winners' names very shortly. So this is your last. You have 60 seconds, basically, to join. People are piling on with questions if you want to keep going. I'm cool with that. Let me see. So Darren asks, as a beginner home studio producer, what are the top 3 mixing things you should get spot on EG level? So you talked about one already. Don't blow out your master bus. I know that's one. Are there any other kind of key things for mixing in the home studio?
Yeah, everyone should learn to listen at quieter volumes than mixing loud. Everything sounds good loud, but when you really get to the meat of the mix, like I generally like to start listening a little bit loud when I'm mixing like my low end, just to make sure I feel it. But I mean, even now, if I stand up, I'm using my low end I have a sub pack, believe it or not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just like to feel things. And then once I get the low end right and everything else, I'm mixing pretty low at that point, like conversation level. Because if you can hear things low, if it sounds good low, it's going to sound exceptional loud. If that mix feels good at a low volume, you're going to kill it when it's loud.
And the bad things tend to stick out a lot more. If you can hear gross stuff at a low volume.
100%.
Yeah. Will Joseph asks, am I right in thinking that you should always use a reference track? So what are your thoughts on reference tracks and how
I
can people
I
properly use them?
I'm big on that. I always tell my clients to send me just an idea of where the direction they want to go by sending me references. And then I usually, like, when it comes to just pure enjoyment, I use Spotify. But I also have Tidal because Tidal's high definition. And I use that to reference. So what I do is in Tidal, I put a folder with the client and the reference tracks. And what I do is I constantly A/B. The misconception is to make your mix sound like the mix that's there, because it's never going to happen. You have a different song, different arrangement, different sounds, different artists. They're not the same. But what I always tell people is your job is not to make it sound like that. Your job is that if it gets to a playlist with those songs, that if it goes from their song to your song to another song, they should play seamlessly to the point that you don't hear a glitch.
For sure.
The quality is always there.
Yeah, I guess that kind of ties in because you're talking about different streaming platforms and different qualities across that. And Clinton asks, are there any tips for helping mixes translate across new school platforms? So like, I guess he's kind of talking about like, how do you make it sound good on earbuds or the people who just listen through their phone or like whatever the next new thing, like Beats headphones. When I think about Beats headphones, I think, oh my God, the bass is just going to like destroy my ears.
Hold on, it depends which Beats headphones you're listening to.
So, well, educate me.
So I love the Beats X, the in-ears. I think they're some of the best sounding earbuds I've ever heard, but they were the first generation to be made by Apple. Those were made by
Interesting.
Apple. So they're different. I use the AirPod Pros now and I love them. I've had them now I mean we just talked about it. One
Yeah.
fell in water yesterday and thank God it works. Thank you Apple. But um look, I'm at a point now where I use two sets of speakers, and I know that if it translates well, it's going to translate well. I reference on headphones a lot, so I have a streaming program that I stream with my clients. And what I do is I'll play it and send it to myself, and I'll go walk my dog around the block, and I'll put on my earbuds, and it'll be playing, and I'll be able to take mental notes on it. I'll show you guys, this is like one of my favorite speakers.
Oh, I think my mom has that.
Okay. Hey, mom. So I listen to this a lot when I'm writing vocals. It's directly in front of me, and I have if I move the my computer down, you see I have faders here as
Hey,
well. So I'm able to use that to ride vocals. So look, some engineers love to have multiple speakers. other engineers, like I just listened to this podcast with Andrew Sheps a few days ago. He says he uses one pair of speakers, is JBLs. It's what you're used to. Just get used to something. Once you get used to something, you know exactly what it's going to sound like.
Yeah. And someone was asking too, and I hope I can find who they are. Somebody was referencing, your advice of listen, listen, listen. And and their question is, which I can't find, I'll give them credit if I find them in a minute. Listen, listen, listen. But what advice can you give people for training their ears? Like beyond just how are you able to train your ears to listen critically and pay attention to the right things and learn your monitors and learn your headphones?
By making mistakes while I was mixing. The only way you're going to learn is by messing up. Nobody's going to come out of the gate perfect. It's like anything else. It's like you produce, you think your first song, like, no offense, but there's not that many prodigies, it's practice, practice, practice. You start realizing you put a kick and a bass together, and 2 years down the road you listen, you're like, wow, my kick and bass weren't even in the same key. One was half a step off. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with mixing. Like mixing, you have to make mistakes in order to get better. When I was 24, I thought that my mixes sounded awesome, and now I go back and listen to them and I'm like, oh my God, like what was I thinking? Like,
Do you think you'll have that moment like 10 years from now with mixes from today?
no question. I have a hard time sometimes listening to my mixes.
That's like an actor watching themselves in movies, or like a singer listening to their own song. That's so funny that it
Mix
translates.
engineers are artists too. We're also human beings. It's just, you have to fail first. You have to make the mistakes in order to, like, it's part of listening is, and then part of the listening is also using that as a reference, because if your mix doesn't stand up to that, then you're not there yet. You know what I mean? And you have to strive for that. It's also a good goal to get to.
Absolutely. I just got a message from Thomas. Can everybody hype up Thomas in the chat? Because you guys don't see Thomas, but Thomas at 343 Labs runs things in the background. He is
Sure
kind of like the
does.
silent hero of this whole thing. So if everybody could just drop some emojis for Thomas in the chat, clap it up for Thomas. But I have 3 giveaway winner names, and I'm stoked because they're people we've been kind of chatting with along the way. And if you guys don't know, 343 TV, we are live every single day with a different show. Earlier today, we had Theory Thursday. A few days ago, we had some Ableton stuff, some house stuff, techno. Tomorrow will be Bitwig. Saturday, we have performances. So make sure you subscribe to 343 Labs, 343 TV on YouTube, Twitch, wherever you watch. And also, you can actually enter these giveaways twice. You can get 2 chances, because if you go to 343labs.com/TV, you can RSVP for the different shows. That gives you 1 entry, and then being in chat and using the link in chat gets you a 2nd entry. So make sure you RSVP for the shows you want to watch and get reminders and set reminders, all that. Thomas, they're blowing up for you in the chat, so I think it's a matter of time that we announce some of these giveaway winners. The winners for today's Sound Toys giveaway, and let us know if you're here in chat, because you do need to be here, and we'll send you an email follow-up. Giveaway winner number 1 for one of the 3 Sound Toys bundles is Nick Unj Jasal. You are one of the winners today of the Sound Toys bundle. And I'm super stoked that this person won, because this person's kind of feeling a little bit down in the dumps about their music progression and things like that in the chat, but the community's really been hyping them up. So Chroma Beats, you are another winner today of the Sound Toys bundle. Let's give it up for Chroma and Nikunj. And our final winner, who make sure you let me know that you are here, is Olufemi George. Olufemi George, congratulations. You are our 3rd winner of a Sound Toys bundle tonight. You guys are super lucky, because Ariel, I heard these are some of your favorite plugins. You're a big fan of the Sound Toys?
I literally, yeah, if I can have one, believe it or not, one bundle, it would probably be this, just because my mixes are heavily into saturation. So like Decapitator is one of like my favorites, and Echo Boy is by far the best delay on the market. There's no question about it.
What do you love about it?
How deep it is. Like people don't go under the hood enough to like really understand it. Like you could play with the width, you could offset the left and right delay times while widening it to make it even wider. I mean, it's mind blowing. You can EQ it, you can add reverb to it that people don't even know about. You can saturate the output. I mean, sky's the limit, man.
Yeah, that's dope. I'm super stoked that you were able to bring them in as a sponsor for today. That's great. It looks like our
Yeah,
community is so super hyped about it.
yeah, they're family, man. I mean, they're absolutely by far my favorite company. I'm very close with the owner. I'm very close with a lot of people there, and I love what they do. They do a lot for the community. They do a lot for the music community, for the world community. It's I mean, they're just unbelievable people, and I love them to death.
And that's kind of something we need a lot of right now, especially us in the, music industry.
Whoa.
What can we give back? All that, like that's constantly on my mind, and I'm sure it's on a lot of the people we work with minds, especially in this current moment.
1000%.
Okay, we could go on and on all day, Ariel, for sure. That's what I know. But I do want you to be able to save some of this knowledge and some of this insight for that upcoming, intensive masterclass you're kind of planning behind the scenes that isn't
Yeah.
scheduled yet, but we'll talk about in the future at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah, no question.
So I do see that there were questions we could not get to. I apologize, chat, but don't worry because Ariel is planning something with 343 Labs, potentially a masterclass, multi-day masterclass. It should be dope. If you haven't yet, go to 343labs.com. If you're interested in more information about that masterclass, sign up for the mailing list. If you want to start learning today, sign up for a course because they're starting soon. We've got summer immersives. If you've got kids in your life or if you're a teen or younger and you want to sign up for a summer course that's strictly for kids, you can sign up for that. Ableton, Logic, songwriting, music theory, mixing, mastering. I don't know what I'm forgetting, but I'm sure it's something. But you can sign up for a course that'll really help you level up your music production skills while we're kind of all stuck at home. You could be anywhere in the world and take these classes. This has been a really great talk. I learned a lot. It looks like the chat learned a lot, Ariel.
I learned a lot, and I just wanted to add that if anyone has questions, I love answering. So I'm on IG, so you could follow me, Mixed by Ariel. Um,
Totally.
I'm always down to have people ask me questions. I love teaching and all of that. So
Yeah, be sure to go follow Ariel at Mixed by Ariel on Instagram. If you're following me on Instagram already, some of you in my chat probably are. I'm going to do an Instagram post after this where you can just click on his name and find him right away. I'm super stoked, despite all the technical issues that we had at the top of the stream, that we were able to have such an awesome conversation. Congrats to all the winners. Thank you to Sound Toys for sponsoring today. Tomorrow's stream, we have more giveaways, and it will be a Bitwig stream. And next week, we start it up all over again because we are streaming every single day on 343 TV. Ariel, thank you so much for being on this episode of Tetro Talks.
man, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to, Max and Thomas over at 343 Labs. And this was awesome, man. I love what all of you guys are doing to educate the world on music production and technology and everything under the sun. It's incredible.
That's what it's all about. Everyday live streams, anybody can watch them. They're free. Show up, tune in. You have access to all this great knowledge and learn whatever you need to do. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Tetro and Ariel Borujow on another episode of Tetro Talk.